Oh boy. Oh, that's a good one. No. Hello everyone, back at it again in my little yellow kayak. I just launched the kayak and we're at a new place. Actually, I fished here before many years ago. We used to come here for a family vacation and I'd fish here 7 days in a row. And it's great. It's semi-private. I got the kayak in, but it wasn't easy. I don't think I could do it with a crawdad. There's no proper boat ramp. But anyway, something happened with the dam and they had to drop the water level about 7 feet. So you see on the shoreline, all the docks are dry. And all the stuff that I was planning on fishing is also dry. So it's almost like a brand new lake. It looks kind of surreal to me because I'm used to seeing it at full pool. And this is definitely not full. So we're going to have to kind of roll with the punches today and figure out a way to catch these fish, even with the water down 7 feet. Might be more like 8. Alright, the first thing I did was head to a rocky island, which is actually a lot bigger than it used to be. It used to be just a little clump of rock sticking out. I'm fishing with a reverse rig. That's a Hut Snakes Big TRD with a 2/0 Neko hook. And then I add a fluoro bait keeper onto the hook. I've done videos on this in the past. And it didn't take too long until I got my first fish. That's a smallmouth, but he's not in great shape. He's real skinny. I'm looking to see if there's anything wrong with him. I mean, other than the fact that he's skinny, if I could see any hooks pointed out of him or plastic in him. He was just real skinny, even on the backbone. He had no shoulders at all. And at this point, I'm wondering if the drawdown really affected the way these fish feed. Most of the shoreline is covered in rock. Some of those rocks are as big as a Volkswagen Beetle. Some of them are pea-sized gravel and everything in between. Boulders. You name it, there's a rock like it. But all those rocks are hiding places for crayfish, bait, young of the year panfish. And I've seen these fish cruise along the shallows looking in the boulders for, prey to pick off. And everything's kind of different now. And I'm wondering if they don't have the same opportunities to feed. But I got another bite and another fish. And it's another kind of skinny smallmouth. This one may be in a little better shape. If I could get my thumb on him, I'd show him to you. I'll just grab the whole thing. Yeah, see how slender he is? Maybe a little better. But, they're not eating as well as I think they should have. There was some kind of rocky points jutting out from the rocky island. And I'm sort of fishing those points. It's actually kind of a channel area. What do you call those? Like a saddle area in between the mainland and this rock island. I missed that fish the first time, but I got him the second. That smallmouth is a little bit smaller, but also a little bit fatter. He's full of it too. He seems like a healthier fish overall, just a little bit smaller than the first two. Little guy. So I caught a couple smallies on the reverse rig Big TRD in the Hut Snakes color. And I haven't been fishing that long, so I felt like this was a pretty good start, but some of those smallies were looking a little thin. So I put on a goby tube with a heavy head, a heavy tin head inside that goby tube. The Savage goby tube has these molded fins. It's almost got like a little face. And with a heavy tin head inside of it, it comes through rocks reasonably well. It's got kind of a blunt nose, and I can kind of pop it over rocks because there's rocks out deep too. There's rocks shallow, there's rocks everywhere. And I got another smallmouth. I think that one followed it down to the bottom. But I was moving around this rock island trying to pinpoint areas to cast to, not just randomly. Although I did some blind casting around this saddle area. But there was a couple points coming off from the rocky island, and I just follow those points off. There was one on the south side, there was one on the northeast side. I think there was one on the north side too. Anyway, I'd kind of follow those points out and just cast where I thought those underwater points would end up, 30 yards offshore. And I'm popping that tube along the bottom with a bait casting rod. That's a 610 medium heavy Zodius. I've got 30-pound braid on there and 15-pound big game leader. And I kind of wanted just to see if these fish would go after a tube with heavier line. Sometimes with these clear glacial ponds or lakes, they can be kind of line shy. The water here is tannin stained, so it's got some color to it, and there's a lot of pollen in the water. And that might be helping me get away with the heavier line. But these fish didn't seem put off by the heavier line too much. And if I can get away with catching them on heavier line, I kind of like that. There's another smallie. He doesn't look that bad. Just smaller. But not as skinny as the first two. Anyway, I caught a couple fish on the tube, and then I went back to the reverse rig big TRD. I kind of mixed it up all day long, all afternoon long. I was switching between mostly those two baits. Just working slowly along the bottom, trying to pick off a fish here and there. I should say it's the middle of the day right now. This isn't really prime fishing time. I usually like fishing early or late, but this is when I had the chance to fish, so I jumped on the opportunity, drove up here, and started catching them. Now this next fish was a little different. I was throwing my tube rod around, and it came back with some deep green grass on the nose of it, on the nose of that goby tube, and it's not the best in grass. So I switched back to the big TRD rod, and I got a smallmouth. I kind of feel my way along the bottom with those two baits and switch back and forth between them depending on, what was down there in terms of weeds or rocks. The big TRD reverse rig comes through everything pretty well, as long as you don't set the hook. If you set the hook in like a deep log or something, yeah, you're going to hang that up and break it off. Not a bad smallie. And the tube is a little bit better when the wind picks up. I can stay in contact with the bottom a little bit better. But anyway, right here I was fishing off a point on the southern end of the island, and there was grass down there, and I was kind of feeling my way along with the tube in the grass, and I was picking up too much grass on the tube, so I switched to the big TRD, caught the smallmouth, and then I caught something different on my next cast. Reeled down to him, set the hook. I loosened up the drag a click or two because I could tell right away it was a little bit better fish. And that's something different. That's a largemouth. Some of the ponds I fish around me, the smallmouth on average are bigger than the largemouth. And this pond is different. The largemouth on average are bigger than the smallmouth. I would say there's more smallmouth here. That's kind of typical of some of the lakes up north for me. They tend to be more of these deep, clear, featureless. Yeah, not a bad largemouth. I almost said smallmouth. Ha! He had one more jump in him too. In this next clip, you can see some of the structure in this pond. And it's mostly rock. There's a little bit of deep green weed. There's a little bit of weed on the north side, but mostly it's rock. You can see I'm going over a big boulder right now. And all that stuff on shore and under the water extends out for a good distance. There's some of the bottom of the pond is mud, but it seems like there's rocks everywhere. The wind's picked up a little bit, and so I've switched back to my bait casting rod with the tube. It's a little bit heavier. I can fish it a little bit easier in the wind. And I'm hopping it over rocks. And a fish picked it up. That's another smallie. Yeah, not bad. We're getting there, making progress. Alright, I switched rock piles. This is another rock pile that's usually mostly underwater. At the top left corner of the screen, there's a yellow hazard buoy that somebody's thrown on that rock that kind of juts out. And that's what I was fishing, even though it's half out of the water now. Anyway, on my first cast into it, I lost a smallmouth. Decent sized fish, but through the hook. Every once in a while that happens. And then my next cast, I threw in with a reverse rig TRD and pulled out a largemouth. Now I suspect one of them was in there guarding some fish fry, because I saw some bait or fish fry, and then the other one was probably looking to pick off the fish fry. I'm not exactly sure which one it was, but anyway, there was a smallmouth and a largemouth almost in the exact same spot. I ran out of Rocky Island to fish, so I kind of slid on down the lake a little bit more, and I'm fishing in underwater rocky shoal area with the tube rod, and I'm kind of hopping that tube up and over boulders that are under the water. The goby tube is a good one for that because it's kind of big and bulky, and it's blunt, and it's harder to get it stuck in between the cracks and crevices in the rocks, although occasionally you will still hang it up. Anyway, I got another largemouth just hopping that tube over the rocks, and he's taking it kind of deeply. So first thing I'm going to try to do is get the tube body out of the way so I can see where the hook is exactly. Then I've got a pair of long handled forceps, and once that tube's out of the way, I can go in through this gill plate, being careful of the gills, and then flip the tube hook upside down so the bend is facing me. And once that tube jig is reversed, I can pull it straight out without injuring the fish. So I finally got the tube out of the way. Now I can go in and get that tube jig out of that guy's throat. Give him a quick dunk. Hey, not bad. Off he goes. Alright, I made it to the north end of the lake. Now most of the lake is rock and sand, boulders, more sand, more rock. But this end of the lake is a little bit muddy. And I think that mud allows the weeds to grow in a little bit thicker. There is some deep grass in spots. It's not completely void of vegetation, but this is definitely the thickest stuff. And right before I got in here, I caught a perch. I think it was on the reverse rig big TRD. So I pulled out my BFS rod with a Zoom Super Fluke Junior in the watermelon red color, because it kind of looks like a perch, and that's one of my favorite colors in lakes that don't have a big population of herring or some other bait fish. But I know this lake has perch because I've fished it before, but also I just caught one. So that's what I was trying to imitate here. And I got another largemouth. Off she goes. Now this is where a stream from another pond comes in. And normally it would be a proper stream, but right now it's just a trickle because they're working on the dam. Anyway, I cast the Super Fluke Junior up where there was just a few little bubbles from a trickle coming in. And there was a decent bass there waiting to eat it. Got my thumb on him. And that's the best one of the trip so far. I knew there had to be one there. Now that one looks pretty healthy. So maybe my theory about the water level dropping is hurting the fish's ability to feed is not completely true. This one seems pretty fat and happy. I guess he's just sitting there waiting for stuff to flow down the stream and then eating whatever comes by. It's not a bad strategy. And there's a few other fish in there too, but I don't know how many fish can really support or be supported by that little stream. Probably not many, and I bet that bass chases them off if they get too close. That one was about 4 pounds on my scale. It was kind of bouncing between 4.1 and 4.3 and 3.14. I'll call him 4. He didn't really want to stay on that scale very long. Anyway, kept working my way around. Back to the rock and sand and more rock, so I picked out the tube. What's that? I think I've got a smallie on. Yep. There's a lot of smallmouth in this lake. This next fish was kind of interesting. I went over a lighter spot in my kayak and I saw a dark shadow move away. Now this is mid-June when this was filmed, and I assumed that most of the fish would be post-spawn because most of the fish everywhere I think are post-spawn now. Even as far north as Champlain. Anyway, I flipped him the tube a couple times and he didn't want it. And there's rocks everywhere. I was a little nervous about going at it with a lighter line. But since the fish refused the tube with the heavier line, I switched to the big TRD with the lighter line. And she ate it. I thought about getting the scale for a second, but if that fish really is on a bed, I want to get her right back so she can do her thing. This was on my way back. Again, that rock to my right would be, 5 feet underwater. I broke off another fish against the rock. I set the hook and I think my line was laying across the sharp rock. As soon as I set the hook, the line popped. So I tied on, it's a dark melon colored net bait tube. And it's the 2.5 or 2.75 inch size. Anyway, that bass seemed to like it. Right on the other side of the rock. Another nice one. I don't think he'd go 4 though. Probably 3. Anyway, I had a good time out here today. I almost didn't fish here because I saw the water level drop 7-8 feet and I thought, I don't know, should I even bother with this? But I'm glad I decided to go for it. It worked out pretty well. It was like fishing a completely new lake because in my mind I have all these spots that I fished when the lake was 7 or 8 feet higher. And a lot of those spots are dry, so I had to kind of adjust on the fly. The Savage Goby tube and the reverse rig big TRD were the 2 stars of today. The Zoom Super Fluke Junior though, it caught the biggest fish, or at least the biggest fish I put on the scale, so that gets an honorable mention. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Just like all my other videos, I'll put all the gear, rods, reels, line, lures, colors, all that good stuff in the video description. So you can duplicate what I was doing out here today and hopefully have some good success at lakes near you, wherever you fish. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.